Hi there. Welcome to Text and Criticism. This is your host, Eduardo Flores. We are back with Dr. Wilbur Pickering, and today we're going to speak about the different groupings, clusters, whatever you want to call it, in the pericope of the adulteress. And I was speaking with Dr. Pickering before starting the video, and he was explaining me that the the key part is that family 35 is the common denominator, and that's the key issue. So I'll let you, doctor, introduce us a little bit more with more detail of how is family 35 in the pericope of the adulteress.
Well, in our prior video, I demonstrated that the pericope about the adulterous woman, which occupies John 7:53 through 12:11, must be original, and it was in fact in John's Gospel when it was published and in its present location. However, there is a genuine question about the exact original wording of that pericope. Hermann von Soden and his team 100 years ago collated over 900 manuscripts for those 12 verses, and he reduced those 900 manuscripts to 7 families or lines of transmission that he called M1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The M being the first letter for the word adultery in Greek. The last 3 families, that's 5, 6, and 7, were by far the largest, any one of them being larger than the first 4 combined. The first 4 are small. Maurice Robinson has collated 1,505 continuous text manuscripts for those 12 verses, and he confirms that those 3 families do actually exist, and they're the largest. Now then, the Robinson-Pierpont Byzantine Priority Greek text, that's the 2005 edition, follows M5, family 5. The Hodges-Farstad Majority Greek text follows M6. And my family 35 Greek text follows M7. Well, comparing the 3 editions, does the objective evidence favor any one of them against the others? We have 3 different Greek texts and 3 different choices, lines of transmission. Okay, I will now analyze that question. If 2 of them agree, they reflect the same source, okay? And that source must be older than its derivatives. If we have a situation involving those lines, let's call them 1, 2, 3 for now, that divide 1 and 2 against 3 and 1 against 2 and 3, but never 1 and 3 against 2, then 1 and 2 have the same source and 2 and 3 have the same source. Now we face the question, do 1 and 2 and 2 and 3 have the same source, or do they have different sources? If they have the same source, then 2 is more faithful to that source than either 1 or 3. But how can we determine whether or not they have the same source? To answer that question, I will go to the pericope now, and I will use family 5, family 6, and family 7, which I will simply call them 5, 6, and 7. Okay, you understand? 5, 6, and 7. Right. Those are the 3 lines of transmission. All right. My article, von Soden's treatment of his KR, which you can find in several books and places on my website, contains a comparison of the 3 at the 32 variant sets that are relevant to this exercise. That's 32 just in the 12 verses. That is to say, where one of them differs from the other two. That's, of course, based on Robinson's collations. I've had those in my hand, actually. When all three agree, they reflect the same source,
Right.
of course, of necessity.
Of course.
I made a rough count of the total words within that stretch of text, the 12 verses, that are contained in all three families, and there are 146 such words. So for those 146 words, all three families must have a common source. They agree. Now I will consider the places where family 5 diverges from the other two. There are 18 words. And for three of those words, 5 is internally divided. So what are we to conclude for those 18 words? Did 6 and 7 go astray and 5 stay with the common source? In such an event, attention. In such an event, 6 and 7 would represent a node subsequent to the common source.
Right.
But it is not far more likely that it was 5 that strayed, especially for the words divided. Now I will consider the places where family 6 diverges from the other two. But the calculation is difficult because 6 is squishy, if I can use that expression. I like that word, squishy. With considerable internal division. It is internally divided 17 times out of the total of 32 variant sets, over half. And 12 of those 17 times, one of the variants agrees with family 7, while 9 of those 12 times it also agrees with family 5. So at those 9 sets, all 3 lines reflect the common source, albeit one of them does so only in part. That's family 6. But there are 12 words where family 6 diverges from the other two without division. So I ask, did 5 and 7 go astray and 6 stay with the common source? Well, given its squishiness, it really seems more likely that it was 6 that strayed. But if not, 5 and 7 would represent a node subsequent to the source in that event. All right. Okay, in most of the places where 5 or 6 differ from 7, the change makes little or no difference to the narrative. Small stuff. The changes are possible, not necessary. However, at the beginning of chapter 8 and verse 1, either of the readings of family 6 is inferior within the context, and the first of the two is clearly inferior. In chapter 8, verse 3, family 5 apparently has the form of the verb to leave behind instead of to seize. It just doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
If the form is supposed to represent to seize, it is one misspelled, and two, it is a peculiar form.
Mm-hmm.
The author John was a fisherman whose Greek would not be classical or erudite. It's the ordinary Greek.
Yeah.
I take it that neither 6 nor 5 can have the original reading at those places, and 7 preserves the original. And to be wrong even once does not help their credibility. All right. Now then, I need to inform the reader or the listener at this point that in the above calculations, I did not include one variant set where all 3 lines have something different. Oh, I couldn't conclude.
Right.
And by the way, the lectionaries have a 4th major variant, which is curious, but I didn't count the lectionaries.
Right.
I also did not include another set that involves only a different spelling for the same word and where all the lines have some division. Now then, group 7 has a single clear-cut, unambiguous profile or mosaic as defined by 127 manuscripts. That is to say, there is no internal variation among them. the 127 are precisely the same for all 12 verses. That contrasts dramatically with family 6 or family 5. Further, 7 and 6 join against 5 14 times. 7 and 5 join against 6 9 times. But 6 and 5 join against 7 not one single time. So, does that mean that 7 is dependent on 5 and 6? Or does it mean that 5 and 6 are independent departures from 7? And just by the way, when 7 is joined by either 5 or 6, it is the majority text.
Right.
It's in the absolute majority.
Okay.
Going on, if 6 and 7 and 5 and 7 both represent different nodes subsequent to the common source, how could 7 be part of both such nodes? How could 7 be a revision based on those nodes if it already existed? If there are no such nodes, then we have 3 independent lines of transmission. And it is necessary to understand the significance of the absence of 5 and 6 against 7. It means that the 3 lines are not equal. Either 7 is superior to the other 2, or it is inferior to the other 2. So which is it? The 3 lines have distinct profiles, or mosaics, of readings. That is, they each have a list of variant readings that is different from all other such lists, or in other words, each sign has its own DNA. And that argues against the possibility that any 2 of them had a common source subsequent to the main source that is reflected in all 3, the vast majority of the word, 146 of them. The absence of a subsequent source means that 7 is more faithful to the main source than either of the other 2 and is therefore superior to them. Also, the set where all 3 go separate ways proves that 7 is independent of the other 2 at that point.
Okay.
What objective basis is there for saying that it is not independent of them elsewhere as well? Remember that all 3 agree on 146 words.
Yeah.
Which compares to 5's 18 private words and 6's 12 private words and 7's 0 private words, except of course for the set where all 3 are different, but I did not count those words anywhere. Now then, if anyone wishes to argue that 7 is a revision based on the other 2, they should say who did it, when, and where, and provide objective evidence for their claim. If a revision happened in stages, who directed those stages? And how could the same stage happen in a variety of isolated manuscripts or monasteries, Look, there are identical copies scattered all over the Mediterranean area. How could a revision achieve that distribution? And at no time during the history of the church was there a human controlling agency capable of producing that effect. Never. To conclude, does not the internal confusion that characterizes 6 undermine its claim to reliability? If so, it is the worst of the 3. In stark contrast, besides the 127 manuscripts that are perfect 7, another 55 are off by a single letter that merely gives a different spelling for the same word. Now we have 182 manuscripts. Another 26 are off by a single change. Another 27 are off by 2 changes. Now we have 235 manuscripts, and so on. The level of internal consistency that characterizes family 7, which is actually my family 35, is extraordinary. No other line of transmission anywhere in the New Testament comes even close to that level. So, if you believe that the Bible is God's word that declares God's intention to preserve it, what does that picture tell you?
Yeah, well, what strikes me most are two things. The first is the one you just talked about, that there are 127 different isolated manuscripts all over the Mediterranean that have the exact same wording uh, in the pericope. That's incredible, because we're not talking about one location. We're talking about locations from all over the Aegean Sea, from Greece, Italy, and Asia Minor, also Syria, Jerusalem, and Sinai. And that's, for example, that's hard evidence. We are not making this up. Anyone can go and check that. I'm going to publish the list of manuscripts, this 127 list of manuscripts, so that anyone that's interested can go ahead and go to see if it's true. You know, that's one thing. The other thing that struck me the most is a thing that I call the common denominator, meaning that each time M5 goes against M6, M6 and M7 are together. And each time M6 goes against M5, M5 and M7 agree. And also the phenomenon that you spoke about, that there's not one single time when M5 and M6 group together against M7. So these three things mean that M7 is the common denominator, and if it's the common denominator, then it's the the source, the oldest. Um, what else do I have here? Um, well, so it's incredible how uh, studying, analyzing the uh, the the different manuscripts, they can be classified depending on the profile of shared variants or readings into these three groups, and then you compare the groups and you find out what's happening. So, like, anyone having the interest, the motivation, the time, and the accessibility to the to the manuscripts can do this again, and they're going to get the same result. And that's what I call science. You know, you do a study, and if anyone else can uh, have access to the materials and applies the same method, they should get the same results. And that's the idea of these types of interviews, where we can get out the information about Family 35, how it's the family with the highest internal consistency. 127 different manuscripts having the same wording, up up to the word, up to the letter. That's really incredible. So thank you, Dr. Pickering. I uh, if there's anything else you would want to talk about.
Not this time. Let's save that for the next time.
Okay, so everyone, remember to like, to share, and to comment. And have a good night, have a good day, and may God bless you. And thank you, Dr. Pickering.
Okay.